When thinking about sitting in prison for years, waiting to die, being told, this is the week you were going to sit in that chair. Then you were told, you've been granted a stay. Over and over this happens, but then one day, you were told, this is it. You were going, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You walk to the chair, sit down, feel the cold wood, the smell that comes from the chair, the room. You catch a peek of the person with the black hood over their head, knowing that's the person that will press the button. Whether you're Ted Bundy or just a little old lady, it's scary no matter who you are to be electrocuted to death. The electric chair is starting to come up a lot more these days. The reasoning is because convicts on death row, they are saying they do not want to be poisoned to death and be tortured. They are saying that lethal injection is just paralyzing people, making them lay on a table, conscious and in agonizing pain, but not able to say, move, do anything, but sit there and drown in death. It scares many inmates. I became very interested in the electric chair when making a video on Ted Bundy, his execution. It seems so unreal to go through as a person, waiting to be electrocuted to death. But on the other hand, compared to what he did to his victims, it seemed fair. It made me have a dream where I was walking to the electric chair. It felt so real. I felt hopeless, walking down that bright hallway. People pushing me along slowly, taking me into the room, sitting me down in the chair to end my life. Wondering, was this going to be painful? How long will this last? Running through my body. I woke scared, like I was Bundy, feeling what he felt. I didn't have empathy for him. I was just scared to be in that situation. It seemed so unreal that a human would go through that, and really made me think about execution. The most famous electric chair is the chair that lives in Florida State Prison. It's executed some of the most famous convicts in the world. It's had men, women, sit on its cold, hard wooden seat. It's taken many lives that have taken hundreds of lives. One of the main reasons that we do not see the electric chair used today as much as we used to is that lethal injection has become the humane way of carrying out executions to the general public. It's said to be clean and the safest way for the convict. There's one main incident that happened that put a dark light on the electric chair. One of the last times the chair was used in Florida State Prison, there was a botched execution. In 1999, Allen Lee Davis would be one of the last people executed in Florida State by the electric chair. While the execution was in process, David started bleeding from his nose heavily, and burn marks were worse than normal around his face and leg. Pictures were soon leaked, and the electric chair that was already fading from being used from the public, from saying it was inhumane, has its fate sealed in Florida and many other states that will follow suit for the next many years to come. The same chair that had executed Ted Bundy, Gerald Stano, Miss Judy, and many more that were put to rest from this very chair. One of the most recent executions to take place by the electric chair was death row inmate 61-year-old David Miller in Tennessee at River Bend Prison. Miller was sentenced to death for the May 1981 murder of a 23-year-old young woman who was mentally disabled. The story goes that Miller would bring the woman to his pastor's home where he was staying and struck the girl in the face with a fire poker, beating her to death and then stabbing her in the chest, stomach, and mouth. On December 6, 2018, David would walk to the electric chair, this very one that you're looking at. He would sit down, be strapped to it. They said that when they put the sponge on top of his head, it had so much water in it that he had water running down his face, and then put down the hood. David's last words were, "It beats death row." The execution was performed, and everything went to plan. When you really do research and dig in to how convicts feel, men or women, about the electric chair, you find that the majority of them prefer the electric chair than lethal injection, whether it's just that they don't care and are ready to go, or that they find it the most humane way to be executed. The order of how the electric chair works goes like this. The person is walked to the chair, sits down in the chair. They are strapped in by the officials that help with the execution and are trained. Leg straps and arm straps are placed on, and a strap across the torso. The face strap will then be placed on the convicted's head, pulling their head tightly. Then the hood will be placed, but not dropped yet. A sponge that is soaked in water will then go on top of their head, and then the metal cup that is fitted with a wire that is running from the room of the power supply that will generate the electricity. On the leg, there is another attachment that runs back to the same power supply. What is happening is that the power is coming from the top of the head, running through the body, and out of the leg. When the button or lever is first pressed, it sends out the biggest amount of power, between 2,000 or even a little more, depending on the state and person. The immediate jolt is supposed to knock the person unconscious. For about 1 minute, it will last. It will then ease its way down to 500 volts to not cause the person to start burning. After the first minute and a half, the power will be turned off and the doctor will check to see if the person has a pulse. If the person still has a pulse, they will do another round of electricity. If they do not, the doctor will call it right then, and the warden will say, "The execution has been carried out of the condemned of so and so time." It's all over in a matter of 2 minutes. The electric chair has been around since the late 1800s. The main reason for inventing and making the electric chair was due that hangings were somewhat of a harder execution to perform, especially in front of the public. When it came to someone being hanged, it was somewhat of a mathematical equation. How long was the drop? How heavy was the person? Many hangings were being botched in front of the public. Heads were coming clean off, and people were falling, but just being strangled to death. For this reason, the electric chair was invented. By 1890, the chair was being used for executions. Obviously, the first electric chair was a little more raw and more of an experiment the first few years. One of the most famous and almost mythological serial killers would be executed by the electric chair on the 16th of January, 1936. He would sit in the chair, and within 3 minutes of it being turned on, he would be pronounced dead. The man was 65-year-old Albert Fish, a child cannibal killer. His crimes, too horrendous to talk about, but it could make one think that the electric chair was too easy of a death for Albert. But his execution is somewhat past truth. People would claim that it took 2 big jolts to finally end the life of Albert, but when it comes down to it, it's said that he would pass away for the usual time it took for someone to be executed in the electric chair. When we look at the history of the electric chair, it will take men or women. There's been thousands of people executed by the electric chair. From Ohio to Kentucky to Florida, many have been executed by the chair. Just in New York alone, from 1890 to 1963, the electric chair would take the life 686 men and 9 women. Just in that one state alone, close to 1,000 people in under 80 years. The few hours before an inmate is actually executed are somewhat of a very sad state and a very personal moment for the person to deal with. The inmate will eat their last meal, and then they will be told they have to take a shower. The guards will check all parts of their body to make sure nothing is hidden. The convicted will then be given an adult-sized diaper that they will have to wear. The condemned inmate will put on the last piece of clothing they will ever feel on their body, a prison suit. The person's head will be shaved along with one of their legs, where the one attachment piece will go. One of the other things that will take place, not to degrade the person, but their rectums will also be plugged. Looking at the very early history of the electric chair, it can seem very barbaric. Wood and metal. Obviously many preparations on people were not given back then. Trial and error was a common thing that was learned in the early days of the electric chair. The first female to be put in the electric chair was Martha Place. In 1899, she would be the first woman to sit down on an electric chair. That was a very young and new creation to execute people. But one of the most famous executions for a female is that of Ruth Snyder in January of 1928. Ruth was a mother. She had a husband who she attempted to murder several times, and finally she would succeed in murdering her husband with a man she was having an affair with. Ruth will be taken to the electric chair, walking at will at some times, and the other fighting her way to the chair. When they sit Ruth down in the chair, strapping her to it, she is upset. Before the mask was placed over her head, Ruth would cry out saying, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do." The thick black mask would then be dropped over Ruth's face. There's even a picture taken of Ruth on the electric chair, strapped down. Ruth's case blew up. It was in the public eye. She was a mother, a homemaker. It was a very surreal moment for the public to witness her execution. When it comes to today, the electric chair is starting to be talked about a little more. It's still around, and it's still considered a barbaric instrument for executions for many. So when it comes down to it, which one do you pick? Lethal injection? Maybe even a firing squad? Or are you going to sit down in that cold hard wooden chair? It's not a fun choice to pick, but the question is, how do you feel about execution?